What if I told you that the woman you call your mother wasn't randomly assigned to you by fate? She was chosen by you long before you ever arrived on this earth. It might sound strange at first, almost impossible to comprehend. After all, the very idea that you, before your birth, had any say in the life you would live feels contradictory to everything you've been taught. But what if the truth has been quietly echoing inside of you this whole time? What if you felt it in the pull of questions you couldn't quite answer, in the recurring dreams, the deep emotions, or the moments of reflection where you wondered, why this life? Why this family? Why her? You didn't just show up here by accident. Your soul made a decision, one cloaked in layers of spiritual memory that your conscious mind cannot yet fully recall. That decision, to come into this life through the woman you now know as your mother, was one of the most significant choices your soul ever made. And yet, like a dream that slips through your fingers the moment you wake, that memory has been buried deep beneath the surface of your awareness. But just because you can't remember it doesn't mean it didn't happen. In fact, the truth of it has been silently guiding your entire life, like a hidden current beneath still water. Imagine for a moment a place beyond time, beyond form, beyond the physical. A place where your soul existed in its purest, most expansive state, untouched by human pain, unshaped by childhood, and uninfluenced by the noise of the world. In this state, you saw clearly, not with your eyes, but with a higher perception. You weren't blinded by emotion or fear. You were connected to the truth of your journey. And from that sacred vantage point, your soul looked forward, into time, into experience, into form, and saw every possible path it could take. It saw thousands, maybe millions, of potential lives, different locations, different timelines, different family constellations, and then, with absolute intention, it chose this one. It chose this time in history, this body, this set of circumstances, and yes, this exact woman to be your mother. Not because she was perfect, not because your life would be easy, but because her energy, her story, her emotional patterns, and her spiritual wounds held something that would activate the exact lessons your soul came here to learn. This is the mystery your heart has always known, but your mind has forgotten. That your entrance into this life wasn't accidental, it was designed. But why? Why would your soul choose a mother who was distant, or overbearing, or fragile, or broken? Why would you enter a family dynamic filled with challenges? Shouldn't a soul want ease? Shouldn't it choose love and warmth and safety? These are natural questions, but they come from the part of you that still thinks like a human. From the soul's perspective, evolution doesn't come through comfort. It comes through growth, and growth often requires friction, resistance, contrast. So when your soul chose your mother, it wasn't seeking perfection, it was seeking transformation. You may not remember the exact moment you chose her, but you've felt its echo in your life. Maybe it's in the unexplainable bond you feel toward her, even when words have failed. Maybe it's in the unresolved tension, the lifetime of trying to understand her or be understood by her. Maybe it's in the moments you catch yourself repeating her patterns, or in the moments you swear you'll never be like her. These aren't just psychological quirks, they are spiritual signals, signs of a connection that goes deeper than DNA. Your relationship with your mother is your first spiritual assignment. She is the first mirror you looked into, and the reflection you saw shaped your sense of self. Before the world ever told you who you were, before teachers gave you grades or peers gave you labels, your mother reflected something back to you through her eyes, her voice, her presence, or her absence. And whether she gave you unconditional love or conditional approval, whether she supported your light or felt threatened by it, she was carrying out her side of a spiritual agreement you both made long before this lifetime began. But why can't you remember? If it was such a sacred decision, why don't you have conscious access to it? The forgetting is part of the design. If you remembered everything at once, you wouldn't fully experience anything. Life on Earth is a school of amnesia and awakening. You come here to forget, so that remembering becomes a sacred act of discovery. You come here to experience duality, so that reunion with truth feels like homecoming. The choice to forget is what gives meaning to the process of remembering. Without that forgetting, your journey would have no contrast, no weight, no depth. Still, the memory lives within you. It whispers through your intuition. It shows up in your dreams. It pulls at your attention when you hear someone say something that rings as truth, even when you can't explain why. You may not remember choosing your mother, but something inside you knows that she is a key to your becoming, a lock that only you could open, and a challenge that only you could alchemize. This is the mystery that most people never explore. They spend their lives trapped in stories of resentment, confusion, or regret, never realizing that these stories were designed to wake them up. Your mother may not have given you everything you wanted, but she gave you something far more important, the exact environment you needed to begin the journey of remembering who you are. Whether your experience was loving or painful or both, it was chosen with divine intelligence, not from a place of punishment, but from a place of preparation. Her presence in your life is not a coincidence. It is the consequence of a soul-deep agreement made in love, made in courage, and made for your evolution. You may have moments where you question this, moments where the pain feels too deep to be purposeful. That's okay. You're human. And being human is messy, beautiful, confusing, and sacred. But even in your doubt, even in your questions, there is a truth waiting quietly beneath the surface. A truth that says, you are not a mistake, and neither is your story. You are not broken, and neither is the choice you made to come through her. Your soul saw what it would take to awaken your light in this lifetime, and it knew she was the one to begin that ignition. So, maybe the question isn't, why her, but what now? Now that you know your soul chose your mother with intention, now that you understand this wasn't random, what are you going to do with that knowing? Will you keep blaming the design, or will you begin to decode it? Will you keep carrying wounds, or will you begin to turn them into wisdom? Because once you accept that you chose her, you reclaim something powerful, the ability to choose how the story unfolds from here. And that, perhaps, is the most profound part of all. Your mother may have shaped your beginning, but your awakening shapes everything that comes next. Before you arrived in this body, before your first breath, your first heartbeat, or the first cry that signaled your entry into this world, there was a moment beyond space and time, where your soul hovered in the infinite stillness between lifetimes. In that sacred place, untouched by pain, identity, or memory, your consciousness was wide open, fully aware, and deeply connected to the source. You weren't alone there. You were part of something vast, ancient, and luminous, surrounded by guides, elders, and soul companions, all participating in the intricate dance of preparation. This is the realm where choices are made, where destinies are shaped. This is the pre-birth planning room, the spiritual dimension where your soul, with full knowing and deep intention, selected the life you're living now. It's not a place with walls or floors. It doesn't look like anything your human mind could recognize. But you have felt it before. In your dreams, in meditations, in those strange moments of déjà vu, where you feel like something is familiar, but you can't place it. That's a whisper from this place. The soul's planning room exists in pure consciousness, a field of intelligent light where every timeline, every possibility, every family and circumstance is laid out like a multidimensional tapestry. And within that divine matrix, your soul sat with infinite love and clarity, not with fear, not with confusion, but with purpose. You didn't come here accidentally. You weren't thrown into your body randomly. Your birthplace, your gender, your culture, your parents, all of it was chosen based on the exact lessons your soul needed to grow. Before you ever knew what love or rejection felt like, you agreed to experience them. Before you could walk, speak, or think, your soul had already envisioned the milestones you'd face, the joys and the betrayals, the losses and awakenings, the moments that would break you open, and those that would help you rebuild. Every incarnation starts with this planning phase, and it's here where the sacred contracts are made. A soul contract isn't written in ink. It's encoded in energy, in frequency. It's not a punishment or a restriction. It's an agreement, a blueprint, a vow to evolve. When your soul decided to return to the earth plane, it reviewed the unresolved patterns from past lives and asked, "What do I still need to learn?" Not as a burden, but as a path toward completion. Perhaps your soul wanted to learn forgiveness, so it chose a parent who would betray your trust. Maybe your soul longed to understand unconditional love, so it selected a mother who struggled to express affection. None of these choices were made lightly. They were made with divine intelligence and spiritual precision. In the pre-birth realm, you reviewed countless possibilities. Timelines stretched out before you like rivers of light. You could have incarnated into a different country, a different race, a different generation altogether. You could have chosen wealth or poverty, stability or chaos, nurturing or neglect. And you examined each of those options, not through the eyes of fear or preference, but through the eyes of your higher self, the eternal part of you that sees beyond comfort and into purpose. You saw the lessons embedded in each potential life. You didn't just choose your experiences, you chose your teachers. And your mother was one of the first and most significant ones. Imagine for a moment that you're standing before a vast map of energetic signatures. Each cluster represents a soul group, a lineage, a family system. You scan these clusters not just for their external conditions, but for the deeper, energetic patterns they carry. You notice one family line carries generational wounds of abandonment, but also a powerful lineage of healers. Another has a history of repression, but within it, the seed of revolution and voice. And then, your attention falls on her, your future mother. You sense the pain she carries, the unresolved trauma in her lineage. But you also see her strength, her resilience, her sacred role in helping you awaken. In that moment, you don't see her flaws, you see her frequency. You sense how your energies will interact, how her presence will activate dormant parts of your soul, not to destroy you, but to refine you. You don't judge her, you embrace her, and in the silent language of souls, you say, "Yes, that one. She is the one who will give me exactly what I need, even if neither of us remembers why once we're on Earth." And she agrees, because she has her own soul contracts too. You're not just here to learn from her, she's here to learn through you. In that sacred realm, you shake hands, not physically, but energetically. And with that, the contract is sealed. This is not a fantasy or a metaphor. This is the spiritual architecture behind incarnation. What looks like chaos on the surface often has an invisible order underneath. You didn't just arrive through your mother. You arrived with her, spiritually bound by a mutual agreement that transcends this lifetime. And within that agreement are codes, vibrational instructions woven into your DNA, into your emotional landscape, into the very fabric of your life. These codes contain the lessons your soul is here to remember. Not learn, but remember. Because somewhere deep inside, you already know. When you look back at your life and see the pain, the challenges, and the confusing dynamics within your family, it can be easy to think you've been wronged. But what if the very people who triggered your deepest wounds are also the ones who signed up to help you grow? What if the tension wasn't dysfunction, it was divine friction? That soul-level pressure needed to crack open the shell of who you thought you were, so the truth of who you are could rise. And yes, you forgot all of this the moment you were born. That's part of the design. Forgetting is necessary so that remembering can be profound. If you arrived fully conscious of your contract, you wouldn't grow, you'd simply perform. But life isn't a performance. It's a sacred amnesia that leads you back to yourself. And when you start to awaken, when you begin to ask questions like, "Why did I choose this?" Or, "Why does this pattern feel so familiar?" That's your soul stirring. That's the veil thinning. That's the remembrance beginning. The more you remember, the more you reclaim your power. Because once you understand that your life was not an accident, that your mother was not chosen by chance, but by divine design, you begin to see everything differently. You stop asking, "Why me?" and start asking, "What is this teaching me?" You stop feeling cursed by your family story and start feeling chosen by your soul to transmute it. The room where you chose your incarnation may seem like a distant dream now, but the choices you made there still echo through every relationship, every challenge, and every moment of awakening you experience now. Your soul was never lost. It was simply waiting for you to remember the choice you made, to choose this life, this path, and this mother. What if everything you've ever labeled as unfair, painful, or uncomfortable in your family was never meant to be a punishment, but instead a portal, a doorway into something sacred, something your soul specifically requested? It's difficult to understand this while you're in the thick of it, when the people who were supposed to love you the most made you feel unseen, unheard, or unsafe. And yet, from the soul's perspective, comfort was never the goal. Not in this life, not in this incarnation. Your soul didn't come here to feel cozy, it came here to evolve. You see, your soul already knows what peace feels like. It knows oneness, timelessness, infinite light. The eternal realm, where your true essence originates, is not a place of confusion or conflict. It's a space of deep unity, where nothing is missing. So when your soul chooses to incarnate into a human experience, it isn't seeking to maintain what it already knows, it's seeking something it can't experience in that realm, growth through contrast. And there is no greater contrast than being born into a human life where love can feel conditional, where safety can be inconsistent, where relationships can wound as much as they heal. These aren't mistakes, they're catalysts. If your life had been wrapped in constant ease, wrapped in the perfect mother, the perfect home, the perfect circumstances, how would your soul be stretched? How would your compassion be tested? Where would your strength be forged? Growth doesn't bloom in the soil of perfection. It rises through pressure, through rupture, through the messy middle. It's in the mother who withheld affection that you learn the sacred art of self-love. It's in the emotionally unavailable parent that you find the courage to validate yourself. It's in the chaos of dysfunction that you begin to crave inner peace, and eventually create it. From a higher lens, the most challenging dynamics are not curses, they are invitations. They invite you to remember who you really are, to reclaim the power you once gave away, to choose a different path than the one laid before you. They teach you discernment, forgiveness, resilience, and self-worth, not because those things are handed to you, but because you must rise to claim them. That is the curriculum of Earth, the classroom of human incarnation. You don't evolve by watching others love you perfectly. You evolve by learning to love yourself, in the absence of perfection. There's a misconception that spiritual awakening should feel serene, that those on a higher path live a life free from hardship. But the opposite is often true. The deepest souls walk through the deepest shadows. The brightest light is almost always preceded by profound darkness. This isn't by accident, it's by design. Your soul is not afraid of struggle. It welcomes it as a sacred teacher. That doesn't mean you have to enjoy suffering or stay in harmful situations. It means you begin to ask a new question, not why is this happening to me, but what is this trying to awaken in me? Difficult family dynamics aren't evidence that you're spiritually unlucky. They're often confirmation that you're on a path of accelerated evolution. They push buttons no one else can reach. They trigger the parts of you that still need healing. They reflect the unspoken stories you've carried across lifetimes. And while the human part of you may ache, the soul part of you is watching with fierce love, saying, "This is the moment. This is what we came for." Because evolution doesn't happen on the surface. It happens in the depths, in the places most people avoid. And your mother, by simply being who she is, has unknowingly held the keys to those depths. This is why you weren't placed into a life of pure comfort, because comfort rarely provokes reflection. It rarely urges you to ask deeper questions, to confront generational pain, or to break long-standing cycles. It's the discomfort that pushes you to alchemize inherited wounds into wisdom. It's the rupture that creates space for rebirth. Your soul didn't want to repeat old stories. It wanted to end them, and to do that, it had to walk into the very fire it came to extinguish. There is a sacredness in this mission that your mind may not fully comprehend. You may wonder, if I truly chose this life for growth, why does it still hurt? Because growth is not sterile, it is raw. It is vulnerable. It asks you to look at the parts of yourself that are scared, angry, or ashamed, and to hold them with compassion. It asks you to feel everything you once tried to suppress, not as punishment, but as purification. Your family, especially your mother, is part of that sacred process. She may have awakened wounds in you, but those very wounds are what led you back to your own soul. It's easy to look back and think, if only she had done this differently, if only I had been born into a more supportive environment. But your soul didn't make a mistake. Even her silence had a purpose. Even her mistakes carried encoded messages. The love she couldn't give became a map to the love you were meant to find within yourself. The stability she couldn't offer became the foundation you were meant to build from your own core. These aren't tragedies, they're soul-forged treasures, hidden in plain sight. So when you think about why your life wasn't easier, why your family wasn't softer, why your mother wasn't more emotionally available or attuned, remember this. It was never meant to be easy. It was meant to be transformational. Your soul came here to evolve, not to be coddled. It came here to break chains, not to be wrapped in comfort. It came here to remember its infinite power, not through praise, but through pressure. And every single dynamic you've experienced has been part of that remembering. This doesn't mean you have to spiritually bypass your pain. It doesn't mean you shouldn't set boundaries or acknowledge harm. Growth is not about glorifying trauma. It's about reclaiming your power in the aftermath. It's about transmuting the energy of pain into purpose. When you begin to see your life through this lens, you stop seeing yourself as a victim of your circumstances and begin to recognize yourself as the soul who chose them, for a reason. Your soul is not naive. It knew this would be difficult. It knew the comfort would be scarce, but it also knew what you were capable of. It saw the strength buried within you, the light hidden beneath the layers, the gifts waiting to be born from the very soil of adversity. You came here for more than survival. You came here to rise. And now that you know this, you can stop asking for things to be easier. You can start asking for the strength to continue becoming who you were always meant to be. Because comfort may soothe the human self, but challenge awakens the soul. And that awakening, that sacred remembering, is why you're here. It always has been. From the moment your soul crosses the veil into the human experience, there is one energy you encounter first, one presence that shapes your earliest perceptions of love, safety, and reality itself. That energy is the mother, not just the woman who birthed you in the physical sense, but the archetype, the energetic blueprint that lives beneath the title. She is your first home, your first mirror, and your first taste of what it means to be alive in a body. Before you could speak, before you had language or understanding, you felt her vibration. Her heartbeat became the rhythm of your world. Her breath became the wind inside your womb-bound universe. Her emotions became the tides you were unknowingly swimming through. You didn't just grow inside her. You were molded by her frequency. To understand the sacred role of the mother archetype is to understand how powerfully she imprints your consciousness. Long before you ever formed a thought, you were absorbing her energy. Her joys, her fears, her doubts, her longings, they all became part of the emotional soup you developed within. You were not separate from her. You were an extension of her essence. If she felt safe, you felt safe. If she felt unloved, you unconsciously began to question your own worth. The soul may be eternal, but when it chooses to incarnate, it agrees to be influenced. And the mother is the first and most profound influence the soul agrees to meet. On a spiritual level, the mother is far more than a caretaker. She is the portal through which divine feminine energy introduces itself to the soul. She is the living embodiment of nurture, of creation, of unconditional holding, at least in her highest expression. She offers the child not just nourishment for the body, but initiation into emotional and energetic life. Her eyes reflect back your existence. Her touch affirms your right to be here. Her voice carries the codes of comfort or chaos. In every coup or absence thereof, she speaks to your nervous system in a language more ancient than words. You don't just hear her, you feel her in your bones, in your breath, in your wiring. And this is why your soul chose her so carefully. Because the mother is not just a biological role, she is the vibrational landscape your consciousness will walk across as it opens to the world. Your sense of safety, your understanding of love, your ability to trust, to surrender, to receive. These begin with her. Not because she controls you, but because she conditions the field in which you first awaken. The way she holds you, or doesn't, becomes the template for how you later hold yourself. The way she looks at you, or fails to, shapes how visible you believe you're allowed to be. The mother archetype lives in your subconscious long after childhood ends. She becomes the voice in your head, the feeling in your gut, the quality of your inner dialogue. Even when your relationship with your mother was strained, distant, or painful, the archetype remains. This is why you may find yourself responding to adult relationships as if they are extensions of that original bond, seeking love from people who echo her energy, retreating from affection if it was once used against you, holding yourself to impossible standards if she taught you love must be earned. These are not flaws, they are echoes. They are reflections of how deeply the mother's energy roots itself in the soil of your being. And the more you understand this, the more power you reclaim. Because what was once unconscious becomes conscious. What was once inherited becomes a choice. In spiritual traditions across the world, the mother is not merely human, she is divine, she is earth, she is source, she is the sacred womb of creation. She represents both life and the nourishment that sustains it. And your own mother, however imperfect, was chosen by your soul to be the human vessel of that archetype in this lifetime. You may have chosen her because her presence would activate the love you needed to remember your worth, or perhaps her absence would ignite the fire in you to seek it elsewhere, and eventually discover it within. Either way, she served as the initial initiator, the one whose energy pressed its fingerprints onto the clay of your becoming. You see, not all spiritual teachers arrive in robes. Some come as mothers with unresolved wounds. Some come in silence, some come in struggle. Some never speak the words you long to hear. But all mothers, whether through their love or their lack, initiate the soul into the human story. They carry the dual capacity to nourish and to challenge, to comfort and to catalyze. And your soul knew this. It chose to meet the mother through her, not because she would be perfect, but because her frequency held the codes for your next level of evolution. Even now, if you pause and reflect, you can trace your inner patterns back to her. The way you speak to yourself, the way you respond when things go wrong, the way you seek love or protect your heart. Somewhere within those behaviors lives a small child, still echoing the emotional rhythms of the earliest years. That child is not broken. That child is echoing the archetype. And the healing begins when you no longer see your mother as just the person who raised you, but as the energetic mirror your soul agreed to face. The sacred role of the mother isn't limited to the woman herself. It continues through the relationship you now hold with your own inner mother. Do you speak to yourself with kindness? Do you soothe yourself when you're afraid? Do you allow yourself to rest, to feel, to receive? These are the hallmarks of the divine mother energy moving through you. And if your real mother couldn't offer that energy, your soul is now asking you to become the mother your younger self never had, to embody the love you once searched for outside yourself. That is the sacred reclamation of the mother archetype, not to reject what was, but to complete it. Sometimes the most powerful thing you can do is see your mother not just as a person, but as a soul who was also shaped by a mother, and her mother by another. You are part of a long chain of women, each influenced by the one before. The archetype ripples through generations, carrying both wounds and wisdom. And when you begin to work with that energy consciously, you don't just heal yourself, you begin to shift the entire lineage. You become the one who interrupts the pattern, who speaks softness where there was silence, who chooses compassion where there was criticism, who holds space where there was absence. This is the spiritual task you accepted the moment your soul chose her. You came not to blame, but to transform. You came not to replicate, but to rewrite. And by honoring the mother archetype, both in her human form and her divine essence, you realign with the original intention of your soul's journey. You begin to see her not just as the first woman you met, but as the first mirror, the one who reflected you into being. And even if her reflection was cracked or clouded, the light behind it was always yours. The mother was the first teacher, the first frequency, the first love, however flawed, and through her, you were invited to remember the sacredness of your own becoming. The invitation now is not to dwell in what was missing, but to awaken to what is possible. To hold the mother energy within yourself as a holy force. To honor her archetype in others without judgment. To nurture the inner child still seeking her presence. Because in truth, she lives within you now. Not just her voice or her memories, but the energy of the mother herself. The one who creates, who nourishes, who rebirths. And through that energy, you begin again, not as the child in search of love, but as the soul who finally remembers it was never lost. What if I told you that your mother's flaws weren't flaws at all, but sacred triggers, chosen by your soul to awaken parts of you that could not be activated in any other way? It's not easy to look at the parts of her that hurt you and see purpose. It's not natural to revisit the moments of neglect, judgment, overprotection, or emotional distance, and believe they were part of a divine design. But when you begin to see your mother not just as a person, but as a soul playing a role in your awakening, something powerful happens. You begin to reclaim the story, and in doing so, you begin to reclaim yourself. Your mother, in all her imperfections, was a mirror for the exact lessons your soul came here to master. If she was overly critical, she was unknowingly preparing you to discover the true source of your worth within yourself. If she was emotionally absent, she was calling you to learn how to nurture your own inner child, how to sit with your needs and respond to them with tenderness. If she was controlling or overbearing, she was teaching you how to set boundaries, how to develop a sense of sovereignty over your own life. These traits may have created pain, but they also created the conditions necessary for profound internal growth. There is something sacred about the discomfort that arises from the parts of your mother that felt hard to love. That discomfort is a signal. It tells you where healing is needed and what part of you has been waiting to rise. When you were a child, you didn't have the awareness to separate her behavior from your identity. Her moods became your fault. Her approval became your oxygen. Her silence became your shame. But none of that was true. She wasn't reflecting who you were. She was revealing what needed to be healed. And what needed to be healed wasn't brokenness. It was disconnection from your worth, your voice, your inner guidance, your right to feel, to express, to exist fully. Your soul knew this. It knew that only certain wounds could bring certain gifts to the surface. It knew that to learn how to trust yourself, you might need to experience betrayal. It knew that to cultivate compassion, you might need to witness cruelty. It knew that to awaken unconditional love, you might need to grow up around conditions so suffocating they pushed you to find the love they couldn't offer. There's nothing accidental about what triggered you. Your mother's behavior, whether loud or silent, explosive or absent, was part of a vibrational contract. She played the role her soul agreed to, not because she wanted to hurt you, but because she had her own lessons too. And sometimes, two souls agree to play difficult roles in each other's lives so that both may awaken. Her impatience may have been the teacher that taught you how to be gentle. Her harshness may have led you to discover your softness. Her inability to see you may have been the very reason you fought to be seen, not just by others, but by yourself. This doesn't mean she was right. This doesn't mean you deserved the pain. It means that within the pain, something sacred was waiting. It means that her flaws were never random. They were aligned with the exact energies your soul was ready to transmute. And the moment you stop judging those flaws as evidence of your own inadequacy, and start seeing them as messengers, everything begins to change. You start to realize that your greatest challenges with her are also your greatest portals to power. Think of the child who was never allowed to speak up. That child grows into an adult who must reclaim their voice, who must learn how to express without fear, how to disagree without guilt, how to stop shrinking in rooms that ask them to play small. Or the child who was never nurtured. They grow into someone who must learn to mother themselves, to hold their own heart with tenderness, to stop waiting for someone else to offer what they now know how to give. These are not surface-level changes. These are soul-level transformations. And they don't happen by accident. They are forged in the fire of the very flaws that once felt unbearable. You may have felt abandoned emotionally, and now you're learning the art of presence, with yourself, with your emotions, with others. You may have felt invisible, and now you're learning how to stand fully in your truth without needing validation. You may have been punished for being sensitive, and now you understand that your sensitivity is a sacred gift, not a weakness, but a form of intuition, empathy, and connection that others can't always access. Her inability to see these parts of you did not diminish them, it called them forward. The pain of being unseen is often what awakens your deepest gifts, and your mother, consciously or unconsciously, was part of that initiation. The way she failed to show up for you wasn't just a wound, it was a whisper from your soul saying, "Don't wait for her to validate your worth, it's already inside you." A whisper that said, "Stop abandoning yourself in order to be chosen. You were never meant to betray yourself for belonging." A whisper that became louder every time she didn't say what you needed to hear, and eventually, that whisper became your voice. Now you have a choice. You can continue to resent her for the way she failed you, or you can rise above the story and extract the sacred meaning from it. That doesn't mean denying the pain. That means transmuting it, turning it into wisdom, turning it into insight, turning it into your personal power. You are not here to be defined by her limitations. You are here to surpass them, to use them as stepping stones into a version of you she may never have been able to model, but which she unknowingly set in motion. Maybe she didn't know how to love you the way you needed. Maybe she didn't know how to hold her own wounds, let alone yours. But somewhere deep inside, her soul knew you would be the one to break the cycle, to end the silence, to speak the truth, to love more deeply, more freely, more consciously than she was able to, not in spite of her, but because of the way her flaws pushed you to discover the truth of who you are. And maybe, just maybe, she was counting on you to do exactly that. Pain is not the enemy you were taught to fear, it is the doorway, the uninvited guide that often walks you straight into yourself. The deeper spiritual paradox is this: the people who wound you the most are often the ones your soul invited in for the sake of awakening. Especially those closest to you, the ones who held your heart when it was most tender, the ones whose love you needed the most, and sometimes received the least. This truth can be hard to accept when you're looking at it through the eyes of your human experience. But from the soul's perspective, pain is not punishment, it's initiation. And the pain that arrives through those we love most deeply is often the exact key that unlocks our greatest transformation. When you think about the wounds you carry, it's rarely strangers who caused them. It's the people you trusted, the ones who were supposed to love you unconditionally, the ones who should have protected you, nurtured you, seen you. And when they didn't, when they abandoned you emotionally, criticized your spirit, dismissed your pain, or made you feel invisible, something inside you cracked. And in that crack, something else began to stir. A question, a hunger, a silent knowing that what you experienced was not the full truth of who you are. That fracture, however painful, became a point of entry into deeper self-discovery. Your wounds became the compass pointing toward your healing. It may seem cruel at first, the idea that your soul would choose such difficulty as a pathway. But remember, your soul doesn't think in terms of comfort, it thinks in terms of growth. And some lessons cannot be learned in light, they must be unearthed in darkness, not because you deserve to suffer, but because pain, when met with consciousness, strips away illusion. It forces you to confront the parts of yourself you've hidden, denied, or forgotten. Pain, especially emotional pain, holds a mirror to the places where your heart is still waiting to be reclaimed. It's not there to destroy you, it's there to wake you up. Often, the mother is the first source of that pain, not because she intended it, but because her own wounds were still bleeding when she tried to love you. Maybe she was absent when you needed her to be present. Maybe she gave you her fear instead of her faith. Maybe her love was conditional, withdrawn the moment you stepped outside her expectations. These experiences don't just hurt, they shape you. They teach you, unconsciously, how lovable you think you are. They form beliefs like, I must perform to be loved, or I'm too much, or I'm not enough. And these beliefs don't stay in childhood. They become the background programs running your adult life, influencing your relationships, your self-worth, your voice, your boundaries. But what if those very experiences, the ones that made you feel small, rejected, or forgotten, were meant to activate the part of you that remembers your worth, regardless of anyone's ability to reflect it? What if the rejection wasn't the end, but the beginning of your return to self? This is the sacred function of pain. It awakens the sleeping parts of your soul. It draws your attention to the places you've abandoned yourself. It reveals the illusions you've internalized. And in doing so, it hands you the tools to become something more whole than you've ever been. Your closest relationships are not accidents. Your family is not random. The pain you endured is not meaningless. These were the soul contracts you agreed to before you were born, the energetic exchanges you chose in order to wake up the wisdom already inside you. When your mother withheld love, your soul was being nudged to source love from within. When she criticized you, your soul was invited to build unshakable self-trust. When she couldn't see you, your soul was pushed to become visible to yourself. And when the pain became unbearable, it was not a sign of failure. It was a sign that your initiation was underway. Pain only becomes suffering when we believe it has no purpose. But when we begin to see pain as a sacred messenger, everything changes. We stop asking, "Why did this happen to me?" and start asking, "What is this trying to awaken in me?" This shift in perception is not easy. It requires honesty, courage, and deep self-inquiry. But it's through this very process that the soul evolves, not by bypassing pain, but by walking through it with eyes wide open, by feeling every ounce of grief, anger, betrayal, and loss, not to dwell there, but to retrieve the parts of ourselves that were left behind in those moments. There is a reason initiations are intense. They are meant to change you at the core. Spiritual initiation is not a soft, pleasant process. It dismantles your false identities. It exposes what is no longer aligned. And most of the time, it comes wrapped in relationships that challenge you to the edge. Pain is not separate from transformation. It is the mechanism through which transformation takes place. And when the pain comes from your own mother, the person you once believed was the embodiment of love, it forces you to ask the most sacred question of all. Who am I, really, when the love I crave is withheld? Ended down drit. The answer is revolutionary. You are the love. You are the source. You are not broken. You are breaking through the illusions, through the patterns, through the idea that your worth is conditional upon anyone's ability to see it. Your pain carves you open, not to leave you empty, but to make space for your essence to emerge. And the deeper the pain, the greater the potential for awakening. This doesn't mean you must stay in painful situations. It means you reclaim the power that was once entangled in them. You retrieve your soul from the places it got stuck. You transmute the wound into wisdom. This is the alchemy your soul came for, the kind that doesn't just change how you feel, but changes how you are. You begin to walk differently, speak differently, choose differently. You stop repeating the same emotional loops. You stop handing your power to people who can't hold it. You stop chasing love and start embodying it. And that shift, born through the portal of your pain, is what sets you free. It is the moment you realize your mother did not define you. She refined you. Her flaws were not your flaw. Her pain was not your inheritance. It was your invitation to rise. And as you rise, something else happens. Compassion begins to flow in, not just for yourself, but for her. You begin to see her as a soul too, shaped by her own pain, living out her own unhealed stories. This doesn't excuse what happened, but it helps you soften. Because now you understand, she, too, may have walked through a similar portal and never found the other side. Maybe she didn't have the tools. Maybe she didn't remember. But you do. And that remembrance is everything. Pain is not here to punish you, it's here to awaken you, to the truth, to your power, to the sacredness of your own becoming. It strips away the illusions that kept you small and reminds you that you were never broken. You were breaking open, into something more resilient, more radiant, more real than you've ever known. You are not the wound. You are the one who heals, and your pain, as unbearable as it once was, is now the proof of your passage, the mark of your becoming, the sacred crack where your light poured through. What if I told you that long before you were born, long before your first breath, long before your heart began to beat in the womb of the woman you would one day call mother, your soul met with hers? Not in a hospital room or in the ordinary places where people gather, but in a realm far beyond time and matter, a space where intentions are clear and truths are known before they're ever spoken. In that sacred place, the two of you sat across from one another as souls, luminous and whole, unburdened by human roles or memory. And there, you made a choice. Not a random selection, not a roll of the cosmic dice, but a soul-level agreement. A contract sealed in vibration rather than ink, rooted in mutual growth, healing, and transformation. You chose her, and she chose you. Even if it doesn't feel that way. Even if the relationship has been filled with silence, misunderstanding, conflict, or heartbreak. The deeper truth still remains. On a spiritual level, this connection was intentional. You were not placed in her life by accident, and she was not placed in yours by coincidence. You entered into a sacred partnership, designed not for comfort, but for evolution. Both of you carried specific energies into this life. Some needed healing. Some needed balancing. Some needed completion. And the contract between your souls mapped out how you would trigger those energies in one another, how you would awaken what had been dormant for lifetimes. These soul contracts are not casual. They are created with the utmost precision, designed with divine intelligence, and rooted in unconditional love, even if that love doesn't always express itself in the ways you hoped for. In this agreement, you may have asked her to teach you about abandonment by not being emotionally available. She may have asked you to show her what true forgiveness looks like through your resilience. You may have promised to be her mirror, to reflect her unresolved pain so she could finally face it. And she may have agreed to carry the weight of your childhood wounds, knowing that those wounds would become the gateway to your awakening. The roles are not always glamorous. In fact, they rarely are. Sometimes, the soul you choose to be your mother in this life is the one who agreed to play the hardest role of all, the one who wounds you just enough to crack you open, the one who, through her flaws, reminds you of your strength, the one who pushes you so far into yourself that you have no choice but to remember who you truly are. And just as your soul chose her for what she could awaken in you, her soul chose you for what you could awaken in her. It's not a one-way path. These contracts are mutual. Your soul may have agreed to come in as her child to teach her patience, compassion, or presence. She may have been longing for a kind of love that she never gave herself, and your existence challenged her to open her heart. Or maybe your defiance shook her out of patterns she never questioned. Maybe your sensitivity exposed the wounds she had spent decades hiding. You didn't just come here to receive from her. You came here to reflect to her, to stir her, to complete something she couldn't complete on her own. This is the beauty of the soul contract. It's not always about harmony. It's about alignment. Alignment with what the soul most needs in order to evolve. It's why you can feel an unexplainable pull to heal a relationship with someone who's hurt you deeply. It's why, even in the absence of love, there's still a thread that binds you. It's why you keep returning to the same emotional landscapes: guilt, grief, resentment, longing, because part of your soul remembers the agreement. Part of you knows that this connection is not just personal, it's purposeful. And part of you also knows that healing it is part of the mission. Not necessarily through reconciliation or closeness, but through understanding, through integration, through seeing the connection not as broken, but as complete in its own strange and sacred way. You don't always have to continue a relationship in the physical to fulfill a contract in the spiritual. Sometimes, the most powerful completion happens in your heart, in your awareness, in your decision to stop carrying what was never yours. Karmic balancing plays a role here as well. Perhaps in a past life, you were her mother, and now she is yours. Perhaps there was a debt of nurturing, of protection, of emotional support that is now being recalibrated. These roles flip and rotate across lifetimes, not out of punishment, but out of love, so that each soul can experience both sides of the lesson. If you felt abandoned by her, maybe in another life you were the one who left. If she seemed unable to love you, maybe in another incarnation you struggled to show her affection. Karma is not about guilt, it's about balance, and these soul contracts are often the tools through which balance is restored. There's something incredibly freeing about realizing that your relationship with your mother didn't begin in this life and won't necessarily end here either. The soul doesn't limit itself to one chapter. It plays out entire volumes, and what feels incomplete now may be the continuation of a story that has been unfolding for lifetimes. That's why certain feelings about your mother can be so strong, so intense, so layered, because they're not just about this life. They carry echoes from before. And within those echoes is the wisdom that not everything can be understood with logic. Some things must be felt, honored, and remembered beyond words. When you begin to see your mother through the lens of the soul, rather than through the expectations of the child, you gain access to a deeper compassion. You stop needing her to have been perfect. You stop wishing she had been different, and instead, you begin to ask, what was this trying to teach me? What did we come here to fulfill? What has her presence awakened in me that nothing else could? And suddenly, the pain becomes a teacher. The wound becomes an opening. The contract becomes a gift. That doesn't mean the journey is easy. It doesn't erase the hurt or justify the harm, but it places everything inside a larger context, one where you are not powerless, but profoundly powerful. One where your mother is not the villain or the hero, but a soul companion walking her own difficult path. One where your connection wasn't created to be flawless, it was created to be fertile ground for transformation. This is the soul contract. It is layered, complex, and often invisible. But once you remember it, nothing in your relationship with your mother looks the same. You begin to feel the weight of inherited pain lifting. You begin to sense the presence of deeper love, even if it was never spoken. You begin to walk differently, knowing that every part of your path, especially the hardest parts, was chosen with sacred intention, and that your mother, imperfect as she may be, was chosen for a reason your soul has never forgotten. You didn't just inherit your mother's eyes, her laughter, or the shape of her hands. You inherited something deeper, something invisible, yet undeniable. You were born into a river of energy that began long before you arrived, flowing through bloodlines, memories, and unspoken stories. When your soul chose your mother, it wasn't just choosing her, it was choosing the entire lineage she came from. Her mother, her grandmother, every generation that walked before her. Their pain, their strength, their silence, their gifts, all of it came bundled in the package of your incarnation. And whether you realize it or not, you carry that legacy within you. But here's the deeper truth. Your soul didn't choose that lineage to repeat it. It chose it to redeem it. The patterns that run through families are rarely obvious at first. They're subtle. Inherited beliefs about love, survival, worthiness, expression. They appear in the way your mother spoke to herself, the way she responded to fear, the way she handled conflict or shame. And she didn't invent these patterns either. She inherited them just like you, passed down like heirlooms wrapped in invisible thread. Maybe your family has a history of women who gave everything and asked for nothing, or men who never expressed vulnerability. Maybe addiction haunts your bloodline, or abandonment, or silence. These aren't just behaviors, they're echoes, vibrational imprints passed from one soul to another, hoping someone will finally pause, look deeper, and choose differently. That someone is you. You are not here to blindly carry what was handed to you. You are here to see it, to feel it, to question it, and ultimately to transform it. You are here to break the chain. And not with anger or rejection, but with awareness and sacred responsibility. Your soul knew that in order to evolve, it needed to incarnate into a lineage where the wounds were still active. Not to suffer from them, but to alchemize them. To turn survival into freedom, shame into truth, silence into voice. The only way to truly shift ancestral energy is to live inside it long enough to understand it, and then choose a new vibration. This is why your soul chose your mother, not just for who she is, but for who came before her. Through her, you gained access to the ancestral blueprint that your soul was ready to work with. Perhaps your great-grandmother suppressed her voice out of fear, and your grandmother did the same out of duty, and your mother followed suit out of habit. And now, here you are, with a lump in your throat every time you want to speak your truth. That's not coincidence, that's inheritance. But unlike them, you feel the tension between repeating the pattern and rewriting it. That awareness alone is the beginning of liberation. Ancestral healing isn't about blaming those who came before. It's about recognizing where their story ends and yours begins. It's about honoring their sacrifices while refusing to live out their pain. It's about turning toward the very patterns that once disempowered your lineage and choosing to do something sacred. Interrupt them. That moment when you finally set a boundary that no one else had the courage to set. That's not just healing for you. That's a ripple of light sent backward through time, touching the women who never knew they were allowed to say no. That moment when you forgive instead of harden, it's not just a personal victory, it's ancestral medicine. You see, healing is not isolated, it is collective. Every time you choose consciousness over unconsciousness, love over fear, clarity over confusion, you don't just heal yourself. You shift the vibration of the entire lineage. It's like being handed a thread that's been tangled for centuries, and with trembling hands, beginning to unravel it. This is sacred work. And it's why your journey has never felt entirely your own. Because it isn't. You carry echoes of your ancestors' grief, their dreams, their silence, and their longings. But you also carry their prayers, the unspoken ones whispered into the night by those who didn't know healing was possible, but hoped that one day someone in their bloodline would rise and say, "It stops with me." And that someone is you. Your soul chose to be the breaker of chains, the disruptor of patterns, the alchemist of lineage. That's why you felt the heaviness you couldn't explain. That's why certain emotions hit you harder than they should. That's why you feel things deeply, even when the story isn't yours. Because on some level, it is yours. You are living inside the energetic residue of choices made generations ago. And yet, with each conscious breath, each mindful step, each loving act, you are dissolving that residue and replacing it with light. Your family may never understand what you're doing. They may resist the changes in you. They may even accuse you of dishonoring tradition. But this is not about rejection. This is about release. You are not here to throw away your lineage. You are here to liberate it. You are here to say the things that were never said, to feel the feelings that were never allowed, to make space for truths that were buried under decades of silence. You are here to take what was frozen in trauma and thaw it with the warmth of your presence. It's not always easy. In fact, it can be excruciating, because breaking patterns often means facing what others refuse to face. It means grieving for the mother who could not love you because no one ever loved her. It means feeling the anger your grandmother swallowed her entire life. It means holding space for generations of emotion that had no place to go. But in doing so, you don't just honor your ancestors, you liberate them. Their energy becomes lighter through your courage. Their journey becomes more complete through your transformation. And through it all, your soul evolves. Because ancestral healing isn't just about the past, it's about your future. Every chain you break now becomes a seed of freedom for the generations that follow. Your children, your siblings, your nieces and nephews, even if they don't fully understand what you're doing, they will feel it. They will grow up in a different energetic field because you chose to do the work. And somewhere, in the unseen realms, your ancestors are watching, not with judgment, but with awe. Because in you, they see something they always longed for but never believed was possible: healing. This is the hidden power of your lineage. Not the pain, but the potential. You are not just the product of those who came before you. You are the portal through which the entire bloodline can evolve. Every breath you take with awareness, every choice you make with intention, every moment you choose compassion over reaction, you are reprogramming the field. The generational trauma that once lived in your DNA starts to dissolve. The emotional signatures passed down like family recipes begin to shift, and in their place, you plant something new: peace, clarity, love, truth. This is what it means to be the cycle breaker, not to carry the burden, but to end it, not to fight the past, but to rewrite it energetically, not to run from the family you came from, but to return to it with new eyes and a different vibration. Your soul chose this task not because it's easy, but because it's sacred, and you were never alone in it. The love of your ancestors walks with you, even when it's buried beneath generations of silence. The strength of your lineage flows through your veins, even when it trembles under the weight of change. And the courage to break the chain? That was placed in your soul long before you were born. You came not to repeat the story, but to transform it. You came not to inherit the wounds, but to complete the lesson. And through every step of this journey, you are becoming exactly what your lineage needed all along. Someone who chooses to love, consciously, live freely, and end what never truly belonged to them in the first place. What if I told you that the tension, love, confusion, or even resistance you feel toward your mother didn't begin in this lifetime? That the complexity of your connection isn't just emotional or biological, it's karmic? The way you feel when she walks into the room, the way certain words from her can unravel you, the way her presence or her absence has shaped you. All of it may be part of something much older than you realize. Not because you're cursed, and not because you did something wrong, but because karma is not punishment. Karma is memory, a ripple of energy echoing across time, asking to be seen, felt, and finally healed. Karma isn't a cosmic system of reward and retribution. It is far more elegant than that. It is the continuation of unresolved energy, the lingering imprint of choices, experiences, emotions, and intentions that have yet to reach balance. If you imagine your soul as an infinite thread moving through many lives, then karma is the energetic residue left behind when a lesson goes unlearned, when a cycle remains open, when love is withheld, or forgiveness never comes. And those energies don't just vanish. They remain with the soul, quietly waiting for the right incarnation, the right opportunity, the right relationship to bring them full circle. Sometimes, that opportunity comes in the form of your mother. The woman you entered this life through may be the same soul you were bonded to in a different role long ago. Perhaps she was your child once, and you were the one who left. Perhaps she was your lover in another time, and betrayal lingered. Perhaps the two of you have crossed paths again and again, switching roles, switching genders, switching stories, but always circling the same emotional center, trying to bring light to what remains entangled. That's the karmic web. It's not malicious, it's magnetic. It pulls you back into relationships where something vital still needs to be resolved. That pull can be beautiful or difficult, sometimes both. There's a reason why certain interactions with your mother can feel irrationally charged. You may overreact to something simple she says, or feel pain that doesn't match the moment. That intensity often points to something deeper, an echo from another time, a wound that didn't start here. And even if you can't remember the details, who you were, what happened, how it ended, your body remembers, your energy field remembers. The bond you share in this life may be shaped by promises or betrayals made long before you were born. Imagine your soul and hers standing face to face in another lifetime. Maybe you vowed to protect her and failed. Maybe she vowed to love you and broke that vow. Maybe one of you walked away when the other needed you most. And now, in this life, you meet again, not consciously remembering, but intuitively feeling the gravity of the connection. You think you're just navigating a mother-child relationship, but beneath the surface, you're living out a continuation. And the intensity you feel is not just emotional history, it's soul memory. The karmic web doesn't trap you. It invites you. It invites you to recognize patterns that didn't begin with you, but are being handed to you for healing. It invites you to take accountability for the energy you bring into this relationship, not from guilt, but from awareness. If you've been through lifetimes of pain with your mother's soul, then this life might be the one where the cycle finally ends. Not because she changes, not because the past is erased, but because you choose to see differently, to respond differently. to awaken. Karma with your mother might show up in subtle ways. Maybe you feel an inexplicable sense of obligation toward her, like you're carrying weight that was never yours. Maybe you find yourself repeating patterns you swore you'd never repeat. Maybe you feel emotionally entangled, unable to fully detach, even when you try. These are clues that you're not just reacting to her. You're reacting to a karmic thread that's been weaving through both of you for lifetimes. But here's the gift hidden inside the entanglement. Karma is not fixed. It is fluid. It changes the moment consciousness enters the equation. The moment you become aware that there is a deeper thread at play, you can begin to loosen the knots. You don't need to know the details of the past to bring healing to the present. Your willingness to see the connection as sacred, your courage to respond with love instead of resentment, your choice to set boundaries without blame, these are acts of karmic transformation. You may never understand why she couldn't give you what you needed. You may never know what you did together in past lives, but you can choose what you do now. You can choose to end the cycle of silence, even if she doesn't meet you in conversation. You can choose to stop abandoning yourself, even if she abandoned you. You can choose to forgive, not to absolve her, but to free yourself. That's the real purpose of karmic relationships, not to repeat old wounds, but to alchemize them into wisdom, into love, into liberation. Sometimes karma doesn't end in reconciliation. It ends in peace. Peace in your body, peace in your choices, peace in the way you speak to yourself when her voice echoes in your mind. You don't have to stay entangled to stay connected. You don't have to carry the past to honor the journey. In fact, your decision to release the pain may be the very act that completes the contract. That ends the karma. That allows both your soul and hers to evolve beyond the patterns you've been looping through for lifetimes. And yes, even if she never awakens, even if she never understands, because karma doesn't require both people to be conscious of it, it only requires one soul to make a new choice, to be the interrupter, the healer, the transformer. And that soul, whether you realize it or not, is you. So, if you've ever looked at your mother and wondered why the bond feels so heavy, why it's filled with tension, guilt, or longing, if you've ever felt both drawn to her and distant from her at the same time, consider this. You may be navigating an ancient story, a story that chose this lifetime for its resolution. And the fact that you're beginning to see this now means that you are the one your lineage has been waiting for. Not to fix what's broken, but to bless what's been hidden. Not to carry the weight, but to transmute it. Not to continue the karma, but to complete it. And that is sacred work. There comes a time on your spiritual path when you must ask one of the most powerful questions you'll ever face. Who am I outside of who I was taught to be? It's not an easy question. It doesn't come with quick answers, but it marks the beginning of your true becoming. Because while your mother may have shaped your earliest experiences, she did not shape your essence. She was your mirror, not your maker. She reflected back to you a version of the world, a version of love, a version of yourself. But that reflection was never the full truth. It was filtered through her own story, her own beliefs, her own wounds. And now, it's time for you to decide what parts of that reflection still belong, and what no longer does. You see, when you entered this life, you entered as pure potential, a soul carrying lifetimes of wisdom, but with no memory of it. And so, you looked to the one who was closest to you for clues about who you were. You looked into her eyes, listened to her voice, watched how she moved through the world. You absorbed everything, not just her words, but her silences, not just her love, but her fear, not just her presence, but her absence. And without realizing it, you started building your sense of self based on the reflection you saw in her. If she smiled at your joy, you believed joy was safe. If she flinched at your tears, you believed emotions were dangerous. If she punished your authenticity, you learned to hide. If she applauded your achievements but ignored your pain, you learned that being seen required performing. These early impressions don't stay locked in childhood. They weave themselves into the way you move through life, into the way you love, the way you receive, the way you speak to yourself when no one is listening. That's the power of a mirror. It doesn't create your image, but it can distort it so subtly that you start to believe the distortion is you. But here's what's sacred. Mirrors can be cleaned, perceptions can be questioned, stories can be rewritten, and identity, true identity, can be reclaimed. Your mother was the starting point, not the definition. She reflected the energy she had access to. That doesn't mean it was the full truth of who you are. If she couldn't see your light, it doesn't mean you're not radiant. If she struggled to love you in the way you needed, it doesn't mean you're unlovable. If she imposed limitations, they were hers, not yours. You are not here to be a copy of her fears or a container for her unmet dreams. You are here to become yourself. It's easy to feel entangled with a parent, especially a mother. The bond runs deep. It forms before language. It exists before choice. And often, we carry parts of our mothers within us, unconsciously. Her voice becomes the voice in our head. Her judgments become our inner critic. Her fears become our hesitation. But, at a certain point in your journey, the soul begins to rebel. Not in anger, but in truth. A quiet voice inside starts saying, "This is not mine. This doesn't fit me anymore." And that moment is not disrespect, it's awakening. To honor your mother does not mean to imitate her. It means to see her clearly, love her where you can, and release what was never truly yours to carry. This is the turning point. The moment when you step out of the mirror and into your own reflection. You begin to untangle the threads. Is this belief about myself something I feel, or something I absorbed? Is this fear of being seen really mine, or did I inherit it through her silence? Is this version of success something that lights me up, or something I was taught to chase for validation? These questions are not accusations, they are invitations. Invitations to meet yourself beyond the programming, to meet the you that existed before the mirror. And when you do, something beautiful happens. You don't just discover who you are, you begin to understand her, too. You begin to see her not just as a mother, but as a woman, a soul. A human being shaped by her own mirrors, her own losses, her own fears that were never healed. You stop expecting her to be your creator and start seeing her as your catalyst, and that shift changes everything. You release the need for her to be something she's not. You release the illusion that your worth was ever tied to her reflection, and in that release, you reclaim your freedom. Your soul came into this life not to be defined by others, but to remember itself. And sometimes, the fastest way to remember who you are is to spend time inside the illusion of who you are not. That's what the early years often give you, a version of self built through someone else's perception. But now, you have the eyes to see. You can look back at that reflection and say, "Thank you for showing me what you could. But I choose now to see myself clearly." And this clarity doesn't require that you sever the connection. It requires that you purify it. You are allowed to love her and disagree with her. You are allowed to honor her sacrifices and still reject her limiting beliefs. You are allowed to feel grief for what you didn't receive, and still offer compassion for what she couldn't give. These things are not contradictions. They are maturity. They are the signs of a soul stepping into its own authority, because that's the ultimate reclamation, not rebellion, not rejection, but sovereignty. A knowing that says, "I am who I am, not because of your reflection, but because I chose to look beyond it." As you move deeper into your journey, you may find moments where you unconsciously become her. You may hear her voice in your parenting, feel her energy in your relationships, sense her shadow in your silence. Don't judge yourself for that. These are simply invitations to notice where the mirror is still active. Every time you pause and choose a different response, every time you breathe and bring awareness, you clean another layer of the mirror. And over time, the reflection becomes clearer, not just of her, but of you. You are not bound to become what hurt you. You are not doomed to live out the same script. You are the editor now, the author, the mirror, and the light. And your mother, with all that she was and wasn't, played her part in setting the stage. But the performance is yours. The path is yours. The identity is yours to claim. You were never meant to live under the weight of another person's perception of you. You were meant to walk in your own light, speak with your own voice, feel from your own heart. Your mother may have handed you the first reflection, but you hold the final image. And in choosing to see yourself fully, to strip away the borrowed fears, the inherited insecurities, the distorted truths, you become something more honest, more powerful, more you than ever before. She was your mirror. She reflected what she could, but she is not your maker. That title belongs to something higher, something infinite. And that essence? It lives in you now, waiting to be remembered, not as a reflection, but as the radiant truth of who you've always been. What if I told you that forgiveness isn't something you give to someone else, it's something your soul gives to you? That forgiveness isn't weakness or surrender. It's not letting someone off the hook for what they did or failed to do. It's not about pretending the pain didn't happen. Forgiveness is a graduation. It's the moment your soul decides that it has received the lesson it came here to learn, and is now ready to move beyond the cycle that has kept you emotionally anchored to the past. It's not the end of a chapter, it's the crossing of a threshold, one that leads you into a freer, fuller version of yourself. Forgiveness, especially when it comes to your mother, is one of the most profound spiritual initiations you'll ever face. Not because it's easy, but because it's sacred. It's sacred because it asks something deeper from you than understanding. It asks for release. And when you've spent your entire life holding tightly to the memory of what hurt you, when your identity has become wrapped around the narrative of what she couldn't give, letting go doesn't feel natural. It feels terrifying. Forgiveness becomes the act of unclenching, of no longer needing to be right in order to feel safe, of no longer needing to replay the story in order to feel seen. You don't forgive because what happened was okay. You forgive because you no longer want to carry the burden of reliving it. You forgive not to erase the impact, but to remove its grip on your nervous system, to reclaim your peace, to stop letting her voice echo through your inner world as the narrator of your worth. Forgiveness doesn't mean you forget. It means you remember differently, with softness instead of armor, with awareness instead of bitterness, with sovereignty instead of blame. This is what makes forgiveness such a significant spiritual milestone. It's not a decision made from your mind. It's a signal sent from your soul. I've felt it. I've lived it. I've ached for it. And now I'm ready to set it down. Forgiveness tells the universe that you are no longer entangled in that lesson, that you've transmuted the pain into wisdom, that you've found meaning in what once felt meaningless. And in that release, the energy you've been leaking into the past returns to you, cleansed, clarified, and ready to fuel your next evolution. Forgiveness becomes the ceremony where you say, I see you for what you are. I see what you taught me. And now, I choose to be free. Because what your mother did, or didn't do, may have shaped you, but it does not get to define you. She may have handed you a wound, but what you do with it is your power. She may have withheld love, but you are not here to stay trapped in the scarcity of her affection. Forgiveness is how you walk yourself out of the narrative that she wrote without your permission, and into the one your soul has been whispering to you all along. You don't need her to apologize in order to forgive. You don't need her to validate your pain or suddenly become the mother you always needed. If she never changes, if she never understands, you can still choose peace. That's the radical, liberating truth, because forgiveness isn't dependent on them. It's a gift you give to you. It's the act of cutting a cord that no longer needs to hold you hostage. You can love her from afar. You can pray for her healing without allowing her chaos to interfere with your own. You can bless her journey and still fiercely protect your own. Some wounds feel too deep to forgive at first, and that's okay. Forgiveness is not a forced decision, it's a process. Sometimes it comes slowly, in layers, like peeling back armor that's been rusted in place. Sometimes it arrives in an instant, unexpected and soft, like a realization that lands in the silence between two thoughts. The timing doesn't matter. What matters is your willingness to be open to it. To stop asking whether she deserves it, and to start asking whether you deserve freedom. Because as long as you hold on to resentment, you remain spiritually tethered to the person and the moment that caused it. Forgiveness is what clears the space so your soul can expand. You can't move fully into your light while clinging to the shadows of what was. You can't fully embody your truth while replaying the echo of someone else's fear, trauma or limitation. Your mother may have acted from her own pain, from patterns she never healed, from beliefs she never questioned. And while none of that excuses the harm, all of it explains the origin. When you see her not just as a parent but as a wounded soul, you begin to loosen your grip on judgment. You start to understand that she was working with the tools she had, and that those tools were likely rusted from generations of silence. Forgiveness doesn't mean re-entering the fire. It doesn't mean subjecting yourself to more harm. Sometimes forgiveness happens quietly, without a conversation. Sometimes it happens in the privacy of your own heart, in a letter you never send, in a prayer you whisper into your pillow, in the moment you no longer feel the need to argue with her memory. It's not performative, it's not for show, it's a deeply personal decision to reclaim the energy that pain has been holding hostage. There's a moment on the spiritual path when you realize that you're not here to fix your mother. You're not here to change her or save her. You're here to free yourself from the grip her pain has had on your perception of love, worth, and identity. Forgiveness is the soul's way of closing the loop. It's what allows you to take everything you've learned through the fire of that relationship and rise with it, not in spite of her, but because of the alchemy that came through her. The most powerful act of forgiveness is often the one that goes unspoken, the kind that radiates from your being because you're no longer carrying the bitterness in your cells. You're no longer waiting for the apology. You're no longer seeking revenge through emotional distance or passive resentment. You've simply outgrown the narrative. You've walked through the storm and no longer feel the need to prove you survived it. That's the beauty of spiritual graduation. The lesson is complete when the charge is gone, when the wound no longer defines you. When you stop being the character in the story of your hurt and become the author of your healing, you may still have moments of grief. You may still feel the sting of what was lost. But forgiveness makes space for that grief to flow without drowning you. It holds your pain in a sacred container and says, "You are safe now. You don't need to keep guarding the wound." It lets the scar be a symbol of your journey rather than a source of your suffering. And in that way, forgiveness doesn't end the story. It transforms it. This is not the kind of forgiveness the world teaches. This is soul-level forgiveness, the kind that rewrites karma, the kind that ends generational patterns, the kind that opens portals into a life where you're no longer living in reaction to someone else's unhealed story. It is an arrival and a release, a death and a rebirth. It is, in every way, a sacred act of liberation. And when you reach that place, not because you're forced to, but because you're ready, something incredible happens. You don't just forgive her, you begin to forgive yourself. For the years you spent in blame, for the pieces of yourself you abandoned to earn her love, for the time you spent believing her limitations were your truth. And that is the moment the soul knows you've graduated. There is a moment, quiet, sacred, and irreversible, when you remember, not with your mind, but with your soul. You remember that none of this was random, that the life you're living was not something thrust upon you, but something your soul consciously chose. And with that remembrance comes a shift so profound that everything begins to look different. The people who once seemed like obstacles are now seen as teachers. The wounds that felt like punishments become portals. The heartbreaks, betrayals, silences, and struggles, all of it begins to rearrange itself in your perception, forming a map that leads not to destruction, but to awakening. In that moment of remembering, you step out of victimhood and into power. Not because life suddenly becomes easy, but because you finally understand that you chose this life for a reason. When you were born, you forgot. That forgetting was part of the contract. It's what made the journey real. If you had remembered everything from the start, there would be no growth, only performance. And so, you came through the veil, whole, but unaware, vulnerable, open, and slowly, layer by layer, you were shaped by the people and environments around you. You absorbed their fears, inherited their patterns, conformed to their expectations, and for a while, you may have believed that was all there was. That your life was something being done to you, not something unfolding for you. That you were at the mercy of circumstance, wounded by forces beyond your control. But beneath the surface, your soul was always guiding you, whispering, nudging, planting breadcrumbs of memory in your dreams, your relationships, your intuition. It was waiting for the moment when you'd pause long enough to feel the deeper truth. That you are not just a character in this story, you are the author. You are not powerless. You never were. You only forgot who you were playing. To remember your soul's choice is to reclaim your sovereignty. It is to take back the pen and write a new ending, not by changing the past, but by changing your relationship to it. When you accept that your soul chose this exact path, with its beauty and its brutality, its light and its shadows, you begin to see yourself as the empowered creator, not the broken product of your pain. You realize that even the hardest experiences were part of a divine curriculum designed to awaken you. And that realization doesn't minimize the pain, it dignifies it. It gives it meaning. It turns suffering into initiation. There is a sacred strength that emerges when you stop waiting for the world to change and start changing the way you meet the world. When you stop needing your mother to apologize before you begin to heal. When you stop blaming your past for your limitations and start using it as fuel for your evolution. This isn't about bypassing emotion or pretending the pain didn't happen. It's about reclaiming the power you unknowingly gave away when you believed that life was happening to you instead of through you. Awareness is everything. It doesn't erase the trauma, but it transforms the lens. Suddenly, your story isn't about being the one who was unloved or unseen. It's about being the one who survived and awoke anyway. You stop clinging to the idea that someone else has to change for you to be free. You stop waiting for permission to feel whole. You understand, deeply and completely, that your liberation is an inside job. And in that knowing, you become unshakable. Self-responsibility isn't a burden, it's a return to grace. It doesn't mean you caused the harm done to you, it means you now hold the power to heal it. No one else can reclaim your voice. No one else can rewrite the belief that you're not enough. No one else can walk you back home to yourself. That is your sacred task. And the moment you accept it, not as a punishment but as a privilege, you unlock something ancient within you. You stop being the child waiting to be saved and become the soul remembering it was never lost. Your mother, your past, your pain, none of it defines you. It shaped you, yes, but it does not own you. The moment you remember that your soul chose her not by accident but with purpose, you open a new door. You stop fighting what was and begin aligning with what can be. You see that every moment of your life, even the ones that hurt the most, was working on your behalf, to carve out a space big enough for your essence to rise. And rise you will, because that's what happens when you remember. You stop shrinking to fit someone else's idea of you. You stop apologizing for your power. You stop asking life to be fair and start making life true. You forgive, not because they earned it, but because you deserve peace. You let go, not because it wasn't real, but because it no longer serves your evolution. And you begin to walk with the quiet confidence of someone who has remembered their origin, not from pain, but from purpose. This is the kind of power that cannot be faked. It is not loud or performative. It doesn't need approval. It's the kind of power that hums beneath your skin and reminds you, moment by moment, that you are the embodiment of a divine choice. You are not here to repeat patterns, you are here to end them. You are not here to carry burdens, you are here to transform them. You are not here to earn love, you are love remembering itself. So when you look in the mirror now, you do so with new eyes. Eyes that no longer search for validation, but reflect a knowing that cannot be shaken. You begin to speak differently, not because you're pretending to be healed, but because you've touched the truth, that you are the living proof of your soul's wisdom. You didn't just survive your story, you outgrew it. You didn't just endure your mother's reflection, you transcended it. And in doing so, you've become the healer your bloodline prayed for, the light your ancestors didn't know they were waiting on. None of this makes you better than those who came before. It simply means you remember what they forgot. And in that remembrance, you become the turning point. The place where fate becomes choice and karma becomes consciousness. This is what you reclaim when you remember. Not just your power, but your responsibility. Not just your freedom, but your clarity. Not just your healing, but your role in the collective evolution of your lineage, your soul group, and the world. You are not a victim of your origin story. You are the author of what comes next. And when you carry that awareness into your life, when you walk with the inner knowing that you chose every thread of this tapestry for your own expansion, you begin to glow from the inside out. You no longer need to be rescued. You no longer need to be defined. You no longer need to be fixed. You are here to remember, and in that remembrance, to rise. What if I told you that your soul didn't just come here to learn from her, you came here to teach her too? That your presence in her life wasn't only about your growth, your healing, or your transformation, but about hers as well? It's easy to think of the parent-child relationship as a one-way street, that the mother is the giver and the child is the receiver. But from the soul's view, there are no hierarchical roles, only exchanges. Sacred, soul-to-soul exchanges where both beings carry codes the other needs, where both agreed to play their part in a divine unfolding far greater than the mind can comprehend. Your mother's soul recognized yours before you ever arrived in her womb. On some level, she knew what your energy would stir in her. She may not have known it consciously. She may not have understood why she felt overwhelmed, triggered, or afraid when you mirrored parts of her she'd spent years suppressing. But her soul knew. Your light wasn't just a blessing, it was a catalyst. Because when a soul like yours enters a lineage, it shakes the energy. It disrupts the cycle. It disturbs the patterns that have gone unquestioned for generations. And while that disruption may be met with resistance, it is never without purpose. Think back to the version of her before you came, the woman she was, the beliefs she held, the emotional limitations she may have carried like armor. Then think of what changed after you arrived. Even if she struggled to show it, even if she never told you outright, you brought something into her life that was meant to awaken her. Maybe it was your sensitivity that highlighted her numbness. Maybe it was your rebelliousness that challenged her control. Maybe it was your questions, those deep, piercing questions that forced her to confront parts of herself she never had to face before. You see, your very existence carried a vibration that her soul called in, a vibration that was meant to illuminate something she had either forgotten, denied, or never fully embodied. And sometimes, the people who are most triggered by our presence are the very ones we came to help awaken. You may have stirred memories in her, not just from this life, but from others. You may have reflected back her unhealed wounds just by being exactly who you are. And while that reflection may have caused conflict, it was also an invitation for her to evolve. Her soul signed up for this, even if her ego resisted it, even if she pushed you away or tried to mold you into something more comfortable, more familiar, more controllable. The truth is, you didn't come here to fit her idea of who you should be. You came here to show her what was possible beyond those limits. You came here to stretch her capacity for love, for acceptance, for self-awareness. You came here, not as her subordinate, but as her equal in spirit, each of you holding up a mirror to the other's becoming. This is the part of the contract people rarely speak about, that children are often the sole teachers of their parents, that the child who refuses to dim their light is the one who teaches the parent how to stop fearing their own, that the child who asks why, again and again, is the one who opens doorways the parent never dared to walk through. That the child who triggers the parent most deeply is often the one whose love is strongest at the soul level, because only that kind of love would dare to challenge someone into growth. You may not have seen the change in her. You may think she never evolved. But transformation doesn't always look obvious. Sometimes it's subtle, internal, buried beneath layers of fear. Maybe your presence made her question beliefs she inherited but never examined. Maybe you softened her in ways she couldn't articulate. Maybe she loved you more than she knew how to express. And just trying to love you pushed her to reach for parts of herself that were long dormant. Even if she didn't become the mother you hoped for, that doesn't mean she remained unchanged. Your birth may have cracked her open in ways she wasn't prepared for. It may have brought up pain she'd buried for decades. It may have forced her to reckon with her own childhood wounds, her own mother, her own shadows. And while she may not have responded with the grace you needed, that doesn't mean her soul wasn't deeply impacted by you. Some of the most profound awakenings are the ones that happen behind closed doors, in silence, in solitude, in the moments when no one is watching. You might never hear her say, "You changed me," but if you could see through the eyes of spirit, you'd know that your presence carved pathways in her soul. You'd know that your voice, whether loud or quiet, was an echo she couldn't ignore. You'd know that your courage to be different created energetic ripples that shook her inner world, even if her outer world stayed the same. That is the power of a soul like yours. It does not require acknowledgement to be effective. It's simply island. And maybe, just maybe, she came into this life with the hope that you would be the one to break the cycle, to go further than she could, to feel what she couldn't, to heal what she never had the tools to understand. Maybe the greatest gift she gave you wasn't her love, but her limitations, so that you could rise beyond them. And in doing so, your growth would become her evolution. Because on the soul level, when one of you heals, both of you shift. The ripple moves in both directions, across bloodlines, across timelines, across dimensions. She might not have said it out loud, but her soul knew what it was doing when it chose to walk this path with you. Your presence in her life was never random. You were not a mistake. You were medicine. And even if she resisted the taste, some part of her was always drinking it in. You may never fully know how much you changed her, but your soul does. And that knowing is enough. The contract was never one-sided. You didn't just come here to learn from her pain. She came here to witness your power, to remember something through your eyes that she had long forgotten in her own. And whether she claimed that opportunity or not doesn't change the sacredness of the offering. You gave her a chance, a mirror, a doorway, and sometimes that's more than enough. There's a moment, one that doesn't always arrive with fireworks or fanfare, when everything you've walked through begins to make sense. Not because the pain disappears, or because the past suddenly feels justifiable, but because you start to feel the underlying thread that was always there, quiet, consistent, divine. That thread weaves through your first breath, your first cry, the way your mother held you, or didn't. It winds through every heartbreak, every unanswered question, every lesson that cracked you open. And when you follow it far enough, you realize something so simple and sacred that it shifts the way you see your entire life. This was never an accident. It was divine design. Your soul did not land here by mistake. It was not dropped randomly into a chaotic world, left to figure things out alone. It came with a plan, a purpose, encoded so deeply in your being that even in your moments of forgetfulness, it never left you. And that plan began not just with you, but with the mother you chose. The woman who carried you was not chosen by convenience. She was chosen by consciousness. Your soul selected her not only for what she would give you, but for what she wouldn't. Not just for her love, but for her limitations. Because both would shape you, both would initiate you, both would prepare you to become who you came here to be. It may be difficult to understand how anything divine could include pain, rejection, or trauma. But the soul sees differently. It doesn't avoid challenge, it integrates it. It doesn't crave comfort, it craves evolution. And your life, with all its imperfections, was crafted to give you the precise conditions for that evolution to unfold. The mother you had, or the one you didn't, was the starting point, the launching pad, the first reflection that would awaken something ancient in you. Whether she was nurturing or negligent, present or absent, tender or critical, she was part of a design so much bigger than her own behavior. Her energy, her voice, her vibration, it all acted as a catalyst to awaken your deeper mission. That mission isn't a job title or a goal to check off a list. It's something far more sacred. It's the remembering of who you really are beneath the roles, the wounds, and the stories. Your purpose is not something you find, it's something you embody. It's the light you let shine through the cracks. It's the love you offer, even when love wasn't offered to you. It's the courage to be who you truly are in a world that trained you to be small. Every step you've taken, every pain you've transmuted, has been leading you back to that purpose. You weren't meant to become your mother. You weren't meant to rebel against her either. You were meant to transcend the pattern, to stand in the middle of what was passed down and choose something new. That's the alchemy. That's the divine design. Your soul knew that only through the friction of contrast could you truly discover your fire. Only through the ache of not being fully seen could you learn to see yourself clearly. Only through the challenge of inherited wounds could you rise with empathy, compassion, and strength that could never be taught, only earned through experience. And so, here you are now, awake, aware, holding the thread in your hands and realizing it has always led you to this very moment. The moment where you stop trying to fix the past and start honoring it for the wisdom it gave you. The moment where you stop waiting for someone else to change and recognize that you are the change. The moment when you choose not to be defined by your origin, but to be refined by it. That is the mark of a soul that has remembered. When you understand that nothing was accidental, you also understand that everything holds meaning, even the silence, even the absence, even the moments that broke your heart. They were not punishments, they were prompts. They were the universe, whispering, "This is your moment to awaken. This is your time to choose differently. This is your path to embody something higher." And as you look back on your life through this lens, the pieces begin to form a picture of resilience, of grace, of sacred unfolding. Your soul did not come here to repeat stories. It came to rewrite them. It did not come to suffer. It came to transcend. And transcendence is not escape, it's transformation. It's the sacred act of standing in the center of everything that tried to limit you and saying, "I still choose to rise. I still choose to love. I still choose to remember who I am." That is your purpose. That is your power. And now, the path ahead is clear. Not easy. Not free of challenge. But clear. You are no longer walking blind. You are walking with the full awareness that your life has meaning beyond what your eyes can see. You are no longer just surviving. You are living with intention. You are no longer waiting for approval from those who couldn't give it. You are affirming your own worth with every breath. You are no longer trapped in the reflection of who someone else said you were. You are gazing into your own truth, fully illuminated, fully chosen. The design of your life was never to punish, it was to prepare you to lead, to love, to embody a new way of being. Your story, with all its jagged edges and sacred turns, is the exact story someone else will need to hear one day. And in your courage to live it fully, you become the permission slip for others to do the same. That is the ripple effect of healing, that is the echo of remembering, and it begins with the quiet decision to say, "This was never random, I chose this, and now I choose what comes next." You are the dream of your ancestors realized. You are the one your lineage has been waiting for. You are the seed that cracked open so that the tree could grow in a new direction. Your soul chose this life, this mother, this body, this exact path, not for comfort, but for calling. And now that you remember, the question becomes simple and profound. Will you live what your soul came here to live? This is your invitation, to no longer shrink in the shadow of what was, but to rise in the light of what island, to become the embodied answer to the divine question your soul once asked in the space between lifetimes. What if I chose to awaken? What if I chose to heal? What if I chose to become the love I once searched for? The answer, now, is up to you. Not to fix the past, but to fulfill the purpose that the past has shaped you for. This is your moment. This is your remembering. And this beautiful, complex, and holy life was never an accident. It was, and always has been, divine design.